We are live. Hey, everybody. How are you doing? Great to see you again. This is Josh Null with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. I am joined by an old friend. Some of you all that are in our network may recognize him from some efforts and some educational products that we did last year, Matthew Eichmann. Matthew, how are you doing?
I'm good, Josh. Thanks for having me back. And, people may not recognize that on about 2/3 of my head, I've got hair now, though. So that's a little different than what I had going on this summer. Third of my head looks the same, but where it does grow, it's a little different. So
Well, I appreciate that.
Good to see you again.
Last video that you and I did, my wife had convinced me to cut all my hair off, and that'll be the last time. I can't let it go. So
Yeah, your definition of all of your hair is a little different than mine might be, but I understand.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you're not familiar with Matthew, he is the National Retirement Practice Leader for Qualified Plan Advisors. My company, Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, is able to partner with qualified plan advisors on qualified retirement plans like 401ks. And we've come together today to talk about an exciting event that's coming up next week. It's actually the 13th annual version of this event, which is probably a little surprising to you, Matthew, probably makes you feel a little bit old, but is the Qualified Plan Fiduciary Summit. So Matthew, what I want to do, I want to dive right in. Can you tell the folks what is the point of this Fiduciary Summit and who is it geared towards?
Sure. I mean, this is as educational as an educational event can be. It started now, over 12 years ago, and Scott Colangelo was putting this together, and he said, our clients, not just our prospective clients, but our clients deserve an opportunity to get together in person back then and get a lot of education around a variety of topics that impact retirement plans. And so he put this thing together. And the cool thing about Scott is, the idea that somebody might say no didn't even cross his mind. So he put together a great speaker lineup. He got one of the most well-known, if not the most well-known ERISA attorneys in the country to be a part of it. Got the Department of Labor to be a part of it, and really build out a tremendous educational event for plan sponsors. I know you asked, who would this be for? And I think that the general answer is this is for anybody within an organization who works around or touches or has some oversight responsibility with regard to the retirement plan. More specifically, though, this is for anybody who really cares about that plan, anybody who's thinking about it in their idle time, anybody who says, boy, we may not be as buttoned up as we should be from a risk management perspective, or especially this year, hey, we've just been through the pandemic. Our people need a lot more. We want to reconnect with them. We want to re-engage them in our benefit program. And I think, Josh, we're going to have a little bit of something for everybody in that regard.
Well, and I appreciate your words there, Matthew. Last time, again, for folks that are watching this or hearing our voices and recognize your conversation with me this time last year, as the year went on, we were obviously pretty COVID centric at that point. So I think it's kind of a breath of fresh air. Not that everything's gone back to normal and we can just start looking at COVID in the rearview mirror, but it is kind of cool to see on this agenda that we're starting to get into the timeless things again, the Department of Labor. Educational innovations, all the things that you've been banging that drum on and doing a great job of educating the public for many years now. So Matthew, what I want to do, I want to go ahead and bring up the agenda for the event. And what I want to do, I know this thing is divided into sections. What I'd like to do is let's do a rapid fire rundown of each section and what the attendees can expect from that section. And looking at this, Matthew, if you don't mind, I'll kick it off a little bit. But we start the event starts on Wednesday, April 21st. Next week is a virtual event, and we're going to have registration information. You see the scrolling part at the bottom of this video. You can register there, and we'll reiterate at the end of this video. But it looks like we kick off pretty quick, looking out for sponsors and participants. What's keeping vendors up at night? So if you don't mind, man, let's start there and let's look at these different sections we're running through.
Yeah, and that's going to be a great start to the day. Anybody who's been a part of this event before or who has heard Sarah Semino speak knows that she's just the consummate professional and the perfect person to kick off an event with great energy, good practical stories, and she's one of the best storytellers in the industry, frankly. But she works a lot with service providers, and that could be retirement plan advisors, or it could be record keepers or TPAs. And what she said to them is, what are the things that are really keeping you up at night as you're trying to meet your clients' needs and expectations? And so she's going to walk through a handful of very common scenarios that I think will resonate with a lot of plan sponsors, probably a little bit on the plan administration side, but also she's going to get into data security and talk about the ways in which, various employers, vendors are out there thinking about those things and making sure that they're covering all of their employers' needs.
Very good. Well, Matthew, I know you've got these sectioned out to how you like to explain things, but I personally would like to jump in next into something that, quite honestly, was a big, significant reason that several years ago I decided to go to the fee only, drop the BD registration route, and it was the Department of Labor. So I'm really curious. That's the one I'm definitely going to tune in to catch the latest and greatest from the Department of Labor. We have seen that thing whipsaw a little bit with the different political outcomes over the last couple of years. So I'm really curious to see what is the Department of Labor up to, and how does that impact qualified plans? So what say you on that?
Yeah, and again, we're fortunate to have the Department of Labor as a part of an event like this. They don't always get out and do that, but one of the things that I really do value about the Department of Labor is that when it comes to events like this, and the Department of Labor says, yes, we'll be a part of it, but we want it to feel like the spirit of community outreach. So the DOL's interest in this particular event is to talk to plan sponsors and say, hey, look, really quickly in an efficient manner, these are the couple of things that are top of mind for us that you need to be aware of. And so I know in this instance, we're going to have a senior investigator from the Department of Labor who's going to be able to dive in and say, listen, this is how we get the cases that we investigate. These are the things that we're looking out for. And then also the number one initiative for the DOL right now is missing participants. Real quick, deep dive in about 15 minutes on those couple of topics, I think will be a great way for plan sponsors to say, hey, okay, I know this is front and center for the DOL right now.
Perfect. Love it. That's really valuable stuff. The next thing on the agenda, Matthew, is something that you and I talked about at length. In fact, I'll even do a shameless self-plug here. If you want to see the conversations that Matthew and I had regarding the Secure Act and the CARES Act, you can go to my website, gulfcoastfa.com, and go to the 401k forum and just go down there. And there's a couple podcasts, there's a couple webinars that we did, and we really dived into it while we were in the heart of it, really, when the full impact of all this was going on. So let's talk about the next line item there, reaction to legislation. Matthew, catch us up to speed on the Secure Act and the CARES Act and what we're going to talk about there.
Yeah, it was really interesting. There's a lot of developments from both a legislation as well as a regulatory perspective throughout the pandemic. And so, we had the Secure Act, which hit right before it. We had the CARES Act, of course, which kind of kicked off everything last March. And then even the law that was passed and put into law by President Trump right after Christmas, the Appropriations Act of 2021. So what we're going to do here is Rob Massa, who runs our Houston practice and is very well respected on a national level, and one of his best talents actually is to be able to moderate a panel of people to navigate those types of regulatory and legislative developments. So Rob's going to work with those individuals and say, hey, tell us what plan sponsors are asking most about. What are they thinking most about in reaction to the Secure Act, the CARES Act, the Appropriations Act of 2021. And you know what? Interestingly enough, one of the big things I think they're going to talk about isn't even a core retirement plan issue. It relates to student loan debt relief. It's going to tell employers, hey, we've got some tips for you here on how you now have a much broader, expansive opportunity to help your employees with their student loan debt. And so I'm looking forward to that part of their conversation for sure.
Awesome. All right. So the next line item, Matthew, I don't know fully understand what it's going to be about. So I'm curious. Education, innovation, finding opportunity in despair. Now, I recognize despair because I feel like you and I, put our shoulder into it and helped a lot of people work through what could have been a very despairing type of work environment. I feel like we were there to kind of help people in that and be a positive influence. But I'm curious to see what are you all going to talk about at the summit regarding this?
Well, the best part of this is I think the variety of perspectives that people will be able to hear from. And Christian Manga, who runs a sister organization of ours called Financial Fitness for Life, will be moderating this group. And Christian's going to walk through leaders from Fidelity and Prudential and qualified plan advisors and say, wait a minute. So not only did you have to adapt to be able to deliver education to employees during the pandemic and while we were at the height of it all, and even though, kind of to use your words from earlier on, it's not in the rearview mirror yet, we're not completely on the other side, but hopefully we're on the downslope a little bit. Hopefully we're moving into a bit of a new normal, if you will. And what we're going to hear is, okay, how do we take those lessons and actually innovate as a result, right? Not just merely a Band-Aid or Advil. How do we just put in a stopgap? And instead, what are we really seeing as far as that ability to come out and provide innovative educational solutions as we move forward? And it'll be kind of nice just to hear the experiences from Financial Fitness for Life and Fidelity and Prudential and QPA, and get a sense for how they're rethinking the way that employees can receive and need to receive education as we go forward.
Perfect. And I know you assembled this agenda so it had a certain rhythm and flow to it. So I'm assuming that's going to dovetail pretty nicely into investment innovation, which again, as you and I talked at length about over the course of this past year, there's been probably as much change in qualified plans related to technology and rules in the last handful of years as there were in the last handful of decades. So tell us a little bit more about investment innovation and reacting to the markets and participants' needs.
Yeah. I mean, again, utilizing that phrase, finding opportunity in despair, there's so many bad things, of course, that came from the pandemic, but it did force us to rethink how we approach investments for participants. I think we're seeing a lot more really good, strong, thoughtful fiduciaries saying, hey, rather than just develop some sort of core funds list and telling our people, hey, have at it, and it's not up to us to figure out whether you invest well. Instead, they're saying, what kind of solutions do people really need? And I know you've been talking with Matt Wolnowitz from Income America about what that group, that consortium of organizations has developed to try to protect participants' opportunity to have income in retirement. And so we're going to have on Rick Luchinsky from American Century and Matt Wolnowitz from Income America, and they're really going to dive into the development of those types of solutions that people really need. So there'll be that part of it. And the other thing is a kind of a start of the conversation related to managed accounts. And managed accounts have been around for a long time, but managed accounts now are not what they were 10 years ago.
Right.
And managed accounts, I believe, are going to revolutionize the participant experience across the country. So we're going to really kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on where things are headed in that regard and get a lot of plan sponsors to kind of see like, wow, that's a higher level of engagement that if we accompany that with really good employee education, we can do a lot for people.
Very perfect. Speaking of Matthew Wolnowitz, because I know he'll be watching this video, we had a conversation with him regarding Income America on our podcast, Wealth and Waves. You all can find that on my website again, or you can simply go to Apple Podcasts and tune in to what I believe is a pretty unique fiduciary approach to lifetime income, and coming from a guy that expresses it very well, Matthew Wolnowitz. And two, it's always cool to have somebody from my alma mater on our podcast. Matthew and I went to the Harvard of the Midwest, called Missouri State. I don't know if you're familiar with that college or not, Matthew, but that's how we refer to it.
Well, another of our colleagues, Eric Krause, is another of the esteemed alumni from the Harvard of the Midwest.
So Harvard of the Midwest.
Understood. Yes, sir.
Well, one of the things that Matthew Wolnowitz and you and the whole team up there really strive towards is the fiduciary standard. So let's segue into the last couple topics here. We got fiduciary time with Fred. Now, my eyesight's not good enough to see the last name there, but I'm assuming it's Fred Reish. Is that correct pronunciation?
That's correct. And even earlier today, I was speaking with our CEO and our CFO, and we were thinking about our organization and some of the aspects that make it pretty special from a fiduciary perspective. And really, Fred Reish is at the heart of that. Fred Reish is as I mentioned earlier, probably the most well-known and the most influential ERISA attorney in the country, or employee benefits attorney in the country. And what's wonderful about Fred is he has this tremendous understanding of the law, but he has a practical understanding then of how the law trickles down to impact fiduciaries and companies and ultimately participants. And as a retirement plan practitioner myself, I always appreciate finding those attorneys who they don't approach it all from a merely, hey, cover your tail perspective, but instead, let's be looking out for who we're supposed to be serving here, and that's the employees. And so we're very fortunate to have Fred Reish on to be a part of this. And for our people we have some people who will have been to all 13 of these events. And Fred has been a part of all of those. And they've come to know Fred as kind of part of the family. And I say that with the greatest level of appreciation for the opportunity. And so if anybody out there is saying, it'd be nice to listen to the nation's foremost expert, this is that opportunity. That's what Fred's going to do for us.
Well, Matthew, I think it goes without saying that I'm looking at this agenda, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Time. That thing is tight. I mean, you're going to be moving on this, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
tell
we
us.
are. So here's the deal, right? We used to do this in person. And I think we all kind of yearn for those opportunities again. We'd get together about 8:15 or 8:30. We'd have a breakfast, we'd have a lunch, we'd have all these breaks right throughout the day. And what we decided when we moved to a virtual atmosphere last year is we wanted to be in about that 3 hour time block. And so we started with that right now. Well, so much has happened that all of a sudden I felt like we had like 7 or 8 hours of material, but 3 hours I know is asking a lot of people. So I think our goal was, how can we provide people more than 3 hours of material within 3 hours? And so we built it to be like that. We built it to be fast moving. We're going to have a series of kind of, polling questions throughout to keep it engaging. We're going to be moving back and forth. We're going to use less slides than a lot of people use for these presentations. And hey, let's be honest, it's going to be at your desks, so people have the opportunity to multitask. And would it be great if they multitask a little less? Sure. But I think we're going to make it so that it's engaging, it's interesting. But you're right, it's going to be tight, and people are going to be getting nasty texts from me saying, hey, you have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Hey, you have 10 seconds left, and I'm cutting you off. And that's how we're going to run that thing. We're going to move, to your
You
point.
need to get some Oscar music, the music they play when they're
yeah, it's like your time is up, and we're not going to be subtle about the hint. But, we kind of have an abundance of information available to us. And so I think there's a real premium in the ability to kind of chop that down into size. And even like Glenn Spencer likes to say, there's an old quote that, if I had more time, then I would have written a shorter letter. So I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to demonstrate we really want to prioritize what's important to these people.
Very good. Well, Matthew, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell everybody how they can register. And then if you don't mind, I'd like to give you the final word and just send, again, to invite people to come to the summit. So folks, you can, if you see the scroll at the bottom of this page, you can go to that website and you can register there. Also, because Matthew and I have really gotten up to speed on technology over this past year. Matthew, this is called a QR code. Is that accurate?
It is. And better known to people, like my parents as, oh, that's that thing that we hold our phone up to so we can order at a restaurant during the pandemic.
Right.
That's how that thing works. But my gosh, have a lot of us figured out how QR codes work that maybe couldn't have figured that out about a year ago. So yeah, happy
Absolutely.
to be able to provide that option.
So there's a QR code. Let me go back here and we'll do one quick final rundown. Folks, you can register at qualifiedplanadvisors.com. Once you're there, just look for the Fiduciary 2021 Fiduciary Summit link, and it'll walk you through. It'll go through all the things that Matthew and I just discussed, give you the registration link. Matthew, if you don't mind, I know you all up to several hundred registrations now, so
Correct.
This thing's looking really strong. I think you've done a fantastic job as always, and I know the thing's going to have great energy and great pace, and it's going to be a great topic. So kudos to you. If you don't mind, I'll give you final word, and we'll wrap this up.
Well, thanks, Josh. And I would just say in closing, the Fiduciary Summit it's not a holiday per se, but it's, from a professional perspective, probably my favorite day of the year. I mean, it's always been a privilege to be a part of the event. It's actually how I got to know our organization before I had joined us, and feel really privileged to get to be a part of it. Josh, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about it in this way. And what I would say in return is, for those of you who are in Josh's neck of the woods or you're in Josh's network, understand that we started this last year during the pandemic. We started talking about the types of things that real thoughtful, innovative plan fiduciaries are thinking about. This will be a continuation of that. And so you're going to get a pretty good glimpse from an educational perspective about what's going on in the marketplace. But I think it'll help you too when you engage with Josh and say, hey, wow, we need some new solutions. And I think this will further highlight, Josh, that you're going to be in a position to help to make that happen. So again, really appreciate it. And I sure hope somebody out there is saying, oh, I would love to get some free SHRM credits, 3 hours of SHRM credits. I would love free credit. I'm an accredited investment fiduciary. I'd love to get 3 free hours there. I'm an attorney in Nebraska or Kansas or Missouri or Texas, and I would love free CLE. I hope that people say, hey, I'd like to take advantage of that. And that'll be there for us all on the 21st.
Absolutely. And we'll have all this in the video notes. Matthew, again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all that have stayed with us during this video, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Josh.